On the shore of a lake, in a quiet corner of Switzerland, Carl Jung built a tower. He did not hire it built. He did not simply design it and watch others raise it. He carried stones himself, learned to cut and lay them, mixed mortar with his own hands, and over the course of more than 30 years he built piece by piece a small stone structure that grew a room at a time until it became something between a home, a temple, and a portrait of his own soul. To understand why a famous doctor with a full and demanding life would spend 3 decades laying stone, you have to understand what the tower actually was to him. It was not a building, it was a confession made in rock. The first small round structure went up not long after Jung had passed through the most turbulent and disorienting years of his inner life, the years when the images and figures of the unconscious had risen up in him with such force that he sometimes feared he might lose himself entirely. He needed, he said, a place that corresponded to what he had discovered inside himself, a place built in stone and expressing in solid form what he had only known until then as inward and formless. So he began to build. At first, it was one round tower, simple and small. But as the years passed and his inner life deepened, he felt the need to add to it. A second tower rose beside the first, then an upper story, then a courtyard, and later still an entire wing. Each addition was not planned in advance, the way an architect plans a house. Each addition came only when Jung felt inside himself that the building needed to grow, that some new development in his own understanding demanded a new form in stone. The tower did not grow the way a house grows. It grew the way a person grows, one true stage at a time, never rushed, never forced. He gave every part of it meaning. In the innermost chamber, the private room he built for himself alone, he ground his own pigments and painted the walls and ceiling with images that had risen from his dreams and visions. This was the room no one else was permitted to enter without his invitation, the true center of the whole structure, the place where he could sit in silence and simply be the person he was beneath every role and title the world had given him. He carved words and figures into the stone itself, inscriptions in old languages, faces and forms that meant something only to him, so that the building itself became a kind of diary written not in ink but in rock. Jung came to feel that the tower was, in the fullest sense, himself. Every stone had been laid by his own hand, every room represented a stage of his inner development. He said that at Bollingen he was able to be, more than anywhere else, simply what he actually was. In the city, surrounded by patients and colleagues in the demands of his profession, he wore the necessary masks of a public life. At the tower, cutting stone, tending the fire, drawing water from the well, he set the masks down. There was no electricity. There was no telephone. He deliberately kept the modern world outside the walls, because he understood that a person needs, somewhere in their life, a place where the noise of the world cannot follow them and where the deeper self can finally be heard without interruption. There is a particular story from the building of the tower that Jung considered one of the most important experiences of his life. He was working on a stone, cutting an inscription for a corner of the courtyard when the stone did not fit as he had planned. The mason had brought the wrong size entirely. Jung looked at the mistaken block for a long while, and then he decided it belonged there anyway, exactly as it was. On its surface, he carved words and a small figure that seemed to rise unbidden from somewhere deep inside him, images and phrases he had not consciously planned, that arrived the way dreams arrive, whole and strange and undeniably meaningful. He called it, in later years, simply the stone, and he treated it almost as a companion, a fixed point in rock where the deepest and least explainable part of his inner life had found a permanent physical home. It stands there still today. What Jung was doing at Bollingen, across those 30 years of quiet labor, was giving outer form to an inner process. He believed, and taught for the rest of his life, that the human self does not simply exist ready-made. It has to be built, slowly, piece by piece, often without a blueprint, guided only by an inner sense of what needs to come next. The tower was this process made visible. You could walk around it and see, in stone, the actual stages of a man becoming whole. The first small tower was where he began. Each addition marked a further stage of his own integration, a further piece of himself, finally given a place to exist. This is worth sitting with because most people never build anything like a tower, and yet every person is, in exactly this sense, under construction their whole life. The question the tower quietly asks is whether you are building with any awareness at all, or whether your life is simply happening to you, room added onto room, with no relation to what you actually are inside. Jung's tower took 30 years because a genuine self cannot be built in a season. It has to be laid down truthfully, one honest stone at a time, and no stage can be skipped without the whole structure becoming false. There is also something quietly radical in the fact that Jung built it with his own hands, rather than simply commissioning it. He wanted to feel the weight of the stone, the resistance of the material, the slow satisfaction of a wall actually rising under his own effort. He believed that a person's inner development has to be lived, not merely thought about, not merely understood in theory. You cannot hire someone else to become yourself. You cannot skip to the finished building. The labor itself, the years of ordinary, patient, physical work, was as much a part of the meaning as the finished stone. Ask yourself what your own tower might look like if you allowed yourself to build one. Not a literal building, perhaps, but some place, some practice, some part of your life set apart from every role and mask you carry, where you could simply be what you are beneath all the performing. Most people go their whole lives without ever laying that first stone, not because they lack the means, but because they never believe they are allowed to need such a place. Jung believed everyone needs one. A room with no telephone, a silence no one else is permitted to interrupt. A place where the mortar and the stone, however humble, belong entirely to you. If you have ever longed for a place like this in your own life, even one small room where you could finally be only yourself, write the single word for what that place would hold. Naming it is the first stone. Because in the end, the tower Carl Jung built on the shore of that lake was never really about stone at all. It was about the lifelong labor of building a self solid enough to stand on, one honest and unhurried piece at a time.